Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a discussion about ASIC, regulating and facilitating crypto ASICs within the financial services framework. I'm going to introduce now Jonathan Hatch from ASIC, who will then facilitate the panel for you all. Please take the stage, Jonathan.
Thank you for that, and thank you all for joining us, and thank you to Steve for arranging this event today. I'd like to quickly run through the presenters. Now, many of you have already seen me speak earlier, so I won't worry about myself other than to say I'm Jonathan Hatch from our Innovation Hub, and for those wanting to engage, please feel free to reach out. In terms of the presenters we have today, first I'll mention Cathie Armour, who is one of the commissioners of the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. ASIC is responsible for Australia's integrated corporate financial markets and financial services, and as well as consumer credit regulation. That's a mouthful. Cathie is the chair of the ASIC's Regulatory Issues and Policy Committees. She works closely with multiple teams and including those regulating the markets, corporations, financial reporting, and insolvency, as well as some of the enforcement areas. Cathie's experience prior to ASIC was in the legal counsel in leadership roles internationally. What I'd like to also mention is Cathie's a graduate of Australian Institute of Company Directors, and she's a member of the Chief Executive Women Group, as I understand this. Nathan, who I'll mention next, is one of the SEL for our senior executive leader in our ASIC market infrastructure area. He supervises this area, Australian market licensees and operators, as well as clearing and settlement facilities. It covers things like Australian derivatives trade repositories and credit rating agencies. The team will examine a lot of the new market and clearing and settlement proposals. He's also held previous leadership roles in ASIC's market supervision and infrastructure area, with over 20 years experience in these areas, including covering work at one of our major domestic banks. He has worked with the Reserve Bank and the Australian Treasury, as well as the UK Financial Services Authority, now the FCA, and a range of other entities. He has background, he's a Bachelor of Economics and Applied Finance and Investment. Thirdly, we have Hema Raman, who is the head of our crypto asset and working group presently. She has a background as a regulatory policy professional and a senior lawyer who's currently coordinating a lot of the ASIC crypto asset work. She has expertise in providing strategic advice and leading projects to identify policy and leadership solutions and to facilitate businesses driving behavioural change in the financial services sector. Hema's purpose is to focus on a more inclusive society, and she sees regulation as being innovative and a driver towards financial inclusion. So, now I've gone through everyone's bios and hopefully not embarrass people as much as I find them uncomfortable to sit through listening to. I might start as the MC by directing one of the questions that I normally have to run to Cathie. That is, what is ASIC's role and purpose in this space?
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks everyone for having us at the Blockchain Week event. It's terrific to be invited to come along. Look, our purpose, we like to describe it as ensuring that there's a fair, strong and efficient financial system for all Australians. But what that means is that we really need to focus on two things, and that is doing what we can to maintain, facilitate and improve the performance of our financial system and the firms that operate within it, and at the same time ensure that all investors and consumers really have the confidence to participate in the system. So when we're talking about new innovations like distributed ledger technology, for example, or new products like various crypto asset products, from our perspective at ASIC, we're really interested in how those products can be utilised to improve how our financial system operates. We're really, really keen to do what we can to support initiatives to look at those products. For example, one of the things that we're spending a lot of time looking at is the Australian Securities Exchange's proposal to change its clearing and settlement system to use a system that is based on distributed ledger technology, and that's one of the sort of normal things that we would do as part of our work. But we are also really interested in ensuring that we can operate in a way where we're supporting new technologies. And I guess I was really interested to read Senator Bragg's speech at this conference earlier, which I thought encapsulated some of the challenges for us. The regulation of corporations and markets and financial products in Australia is a principles-based regulation, and it's been proven to be reasonably dynamic and able to change with the times. But one of the challenges for us is how well that legislation changes with the times when we've got new products, particularly crypto assets. Are they products that are within our regulatory remit or not? And we can no doubt talk about that a little bit more as the session goes on. But that is one of the areas that is a challenge, and I was heartened to hear that Senator Bragg recognising that challenge and perhaps suggesting that it might be time for policymakers to have a little bit of a closer look at that framework. But that's broadly what we do, and as part of our job in dealing with consumer issues and investor issues, we receive a lot of complaints where things aren't going right, I guess. Sorry, in the investor universe, and that is one of the challenges for us that we're finding with some crypto asset products. We have received just over the last little while a significant number of complaints about crypto scams, and we know that this is probably a concern as much to all of you who participate in the industry as it is to us, and so we'd be really appreciative also of feedback about poor practices or scam activity that folk have that they could pass on to us, because that we see often. If we can, we would like to take action to disrupt poor actors in this sector. So hopefully that gives a bit of a sense of what we do and why we're interested. But back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Cathie. I might just mention we have had a question in the Q&A. Now, in ASIC official capacity, we aren't going to comment on a specific entity or specific complaints. I'll just observe that Cathie did cover off some of the general work we do on scams. But if anyone does have any concerns, please feel free to reach out to us on those sort of things. That we've covered off a lot of the areas there, but was there anything else you wanted to add, Cathie, on managing expectations, or comfortable with that being the limit there? Because there's a few things that you may want to know.
I mean, I think Jonathan's speaking with the experience of ASIC's Innovation Hub, and how we really do want to try and support new businesses that are exploiting new technologies or providing new technologies into our financial system. But at the same time, it can be a real challenge for us to do that in a way that is maybe meets all of your goals and wishes, if you like. So we try and give some guidance about how our legislation might apply to your businesses, and we try to assist firms. But we do actually, we are funded by government, but we recover our costs from industry. So people are paying effectively for our time. So we'd like to work with new firms to actually help develop good ideas and good structures before there's sort of too much expectation. I know I've met with a number of firms who've been had great ideas, disappointed that we aren't able to sort of immediately help that sort of become the total fruition, and we just can't do that. We often need to help send you on the path to get some more concrete advice and manage the issues. And what we can do is sort of give you the guide rails, but I just didn't want people to think that perhaps coming along to ASIC you'd sort of get the regulatory structure of your business all sorted out in one meeting. That's unfortunately not how it works. So it'd be nice if it could, but it unfortunately there is a limit to what we're able to do there.
Thank you, Cathie. What I might do is move on to Nathan. I can see some questions are coming in. I'll look at those in a moment. So Nathan, some things that in your capacity here, would there be some things you'd want to pass to the audience here around how ASIC is looking to regulate the crypto space or anything on the crypto asset side?
Thanks, Jonathan. I've probably got a fair bit to say in this space, and there have been a few news articles recently. And I note that, again, just mentioning Cathie's reference to Senator Bragg's media release from earlier in the week. That's quite and some important statements in there about some work the government's looking at doing from a policy perspective. I think as part of our role in regulating crypto assets, it is part of our business as usual activities. We have a whole range of ASIC teams that deal with crypto assets and crypto asset related firms that either come to us through the Innovation Hub to seek some guidance or have a discussion around the issues. But also we do, as Cathie indicated, have a large number of scams or false and misleading statements made in this space. And that's because it's a hot topic area. So you do have investors looking to invest and can be more susceptible to those kinds of operations occurring. So we do have quite a lot of work going on in that false and misleading / scam space. In relation to the discussions we have with firms on an ongoing basis, a lot of it is whether they fit into the regulatory perimeter or not. And that could be quite an extensive discussion. It could be quite an extensive discussion with firms in a traditional financial service capacity, let alone in a new and innovative and highly evolving area such as crypto assets. And really just simply put there, and it's probably been raised as part of this group previously, that crypto assets may or may not be financial products or involve a financial service. And sometimes we can only determine that on a case-by-case basis, which at times requires legal opinion to be brought to bear. That can be expensive for startup companies that are looking into this space, and it's not a quick assessment to be made. Depending on what's coming into ASIC, different teams might deal with those firms in particular. So it could be in relation to what we might deem to be a managed investments scheme, a credit product. It could be arranging / dealing, which is a Australian Financial Services license, or it might be something that's more akin to a market or trading platform, and that's a different license again. So the regulatory perimeter is not clear in all circumstances. There is a bit of a grey area, and really the entities that have the best visibility into what activities are undertaking, whether it might fit within that scope, is the entity itself. So we do look to the crypto industry to identify their product and services, and if they overlap with those existing licenses that they might need. But we do have the ongoing dialogue with the industry, and we're very happy and keen to do that. We have reached out to some providers to ascertain the nature and scope of their offering where we come across certain information. So it might look to us, for example, that a firm is undertaking activities in relation to derivatives over crypto. So that could be futures, CFDs. Then the next question for us is, well, is it as it says on the packet? To ascertain that, what clients might be accessing it. And we've got a fair bit of work going on right now to just try and get a bit of a better handle on what is the Australian nexus to many services that are being provided. So that's a key piece of work we want to continue over this calendar year. We do work closely with our international regulatory colleagues. So there's an ICO network that we're involved with. There are various IOSCO committees. So that's the, I won't go through the acronym for that, but there's an organisation that represents the securities regulators. And there are a number of committees that are associated with it. And we use crypto assets in its broad term here, but it does connect in with many different committees that we're involved with, whether it be stable coins, decentralized finance more broadly, cryptocurrencies, whether it's trading platform related, managed investment scheme related. There's a lot of touch points there internationally. And I might just touch on a few other things that have come up more in our space, in the market space. And I know that question has come up. Well, it tends to come up quite often, and whether a service offering might be a market. So I might just run through that quickly. The first thing I'd say is it would need to be in relation to a financial product. And our info sheet 225, which we wrote off the back of the interest in the ICO market, but does apply to crypto assets more broadly, is a good first reference point. There's also our regulatory guide 172, which deals with markets in particular. But I would say that information sheet 225 is a good first step. With a financial market, it is defined quite broadly, and probably more broadly in Australia than it is in some of our other regulatory jurisdictions. And it applies to any form of technology or physical infrastructure that would enable persons to make or accept offers or invitations by means of the facility. Now, I mentioned before that would need to be a financial product that's actually being undertaken through those facilities, but I'd also make the point that we do see potential for derivatives to be on a trading platform, and derivatives can be a product that is referencing another asset class. So that could be referencing crypto assets or something else. So it could be CFDs and futures. And if there's a buy and sell opportunity on a trading platform, that's likely to fall within the scope of our licensing framework. So there's some of the areas that we have a dialogue with industry on. We do reach out to some firms where it becomes apparent to us that they may at least be marketing these kinds of activities, and to confirm what are they doing in that space and whether Australian clients are a connection point there. It's quite important on that front, and you might be aware the Ontario Securities Commission released a public media release at the end of March, just making a call for anyone involved in those activities to make sure they are in contact with the OSC, because there are quite large ramifications from conducting activities that should be licensed that aren't licensed, not only due to breaches of Potential Corporations Act, but there are also some contractual issues that arise out of that, in that the contracts may not be enforceable in a court of law if they're conducting activities that should otherwise be licensed. So there's some things there to be aware of, that there is some risk involved in that operating outside the regulatory perimeter. I might just pause there, Jonathan, see if there's anything you wanted to pick up in particular.
I'll just have a quick look at the questions, just because I'm mindful of the time. I'm just going to quickly note, because I will pass to Hema and Ducos on one of them. But for those who are asking about things like rulings in other jurisdictions, remember they are different jurisdictions. There are changes that are jurisdictionally specific. So we aren't really in a place to comment on one of our colleague regulators as such. But what I might do, in case we might come back to Nathan a little bit more, unless you wanted to add anything on what we're doing or what areas of focus we have. I'll go to Hema to that.
Yeah, I thought I'd just mention, I did touch on it. We do have some key areas that we are doing some more work in, and stable coins is globally a very large piece of work. So we've got a number of touch points in that space. Internationally, there are principles for financial market infrastructures, and there's an assessment occurring across the securities regulators internationally as to whether they should apply to stable. So there's a lot of work and understanding of what is going on in the stablecoin world in that space. In relation to exchange-traded products and exchange-traded funds, for example, we're giving a lot of thought on how they could work in the Australian environment. I think some of the issues that have been raised in the press are things that we think about, custodial arrangements, are the pricing systems appropriate? And they're the sorts of things that we look at in any event with exchange-traded products, including exchange-traded funds, and that also applies to other asset classes. So I thought I'd just note there some things that we're giving some thought to.
Thank you, Nathan. Now, I'm going to refer to the Q&A. There was a question raised around if we haven't, or if ASIC has any plans to update 225, which obviously, as the question has noted, is made to be very generic, or reissue other submissions to the Senate, which generally wouldn't do because the inquiry was obviously set in the past. But rather than trying to deal with that, I'm going to pass to Hema to perhaps consider Info 225 as the lead of the crypto asset working group presently.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you for the question. I think the short answer is not at this stage. There's no updates planned for Information Sheet 225 on ICO and crypto assets, but I think it's important to take the opportunity to acknowledge that the industry is keen for more specific guidance, and where we're caught is the uncertainty that both Cathie and Nathan have referred to in terms of the regulatory perimeter, in terms of what gets caught and not. And in that context, just, we need to make the observation that crypto assets aren't a homogenous asset class that we can identify consistent principles across the board that would apply to them in a generic sense. And that is one of the barriers, I suppose, to us providing even more detail in that. But having said that, what could perhaps prompt an update later on is more discussions and development and discussion with the industry and ASIC on well-developed business propositions in the crypto asset space that actually try to navigate the existing financial services regime. And I think that would then identify more guidance that might be appropriate, for example. But to do that, we really do need the industry to do the work, and we recognise that as a fintech sort of industry, which has a lot of you working on a startup budget, this can be quite demanding to try and tackle the incredibly well thought out, well established, and quite intricate corporations act regime that applies. And to that end, we do encourage you perhaps to work together in propositions as far as that's possible, to collaborate to try and unpack some of this. For example, just to give a more practical example, we have been sort of exploring business propositions around offering exchange traded products that hold crypto assets as underlying. And in exploring this, we identified that the market operator regime that's in place in Australia is yet to identify sort of appropriate minimum standards that facilitate crypto assets as a permissible underlying. And that raises quite a lot of questions that need to be thought through around, the reliability of pricing underlying crypto assets that trade on multiple digital currency exchanges. And that raises questions around market quality, for example. And there are other issues, around holding and reliably auditing crypto assets that come up there, and questions around, the life cycle of the crypto assets, which are subject to forks and so forth. So that's just an example of how, when you unpack a specific business proposition involving crypto assets, you identify the regulatory requirements that need to be kind of resolved and perhaps modified or sort of thought through. And that's when we can perhaps also provide further guidance to industry when we get to that level of detail and engagement on concrete business propositions. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Hema. Now, I can see from the questions there are a few more questions coming in. I'm just having a quick look at what's coming through. What I will mention for the community here is that, having worked in the Hub for 5 years, we have always been open to providing guidance to other regulatory guides on that space. If you know which product you're referring to or its particular nature, we can always refer you to those as well. There are hundreds of them. But what I might do is cover a bit more on what we could see industry doing to help us, and perhaps pass back to Hema on what she thinks the blockchain industry could do to assist ASIC in moving forward in this space before we try and get to questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. I mean, I've sort of outlined one of the things, which is actually to come to ASIC with very well-developed business propositions to the degree you can, so we can have the conversations about, well, what are the regulatory requirements that we're running up against. I'll also acknowledge that we're very open to learning about the crypto space. It's a ever-evolving area, and we're very conscious that it's hard to kind of get on top of specific issues to the level of detail that's required to help specific business propositions sort of be implemented. I think what both Nathan and Cathie have mentioned in terms of the scam space, we would really appreciate your support as an industry to try and target this. This is a big threat that's there, that, that kind of threatens the reputation of the industry as well. And to the degree that, You can sort of educate consumers through the means that you have available and identify and target and work alongside the regulators that are in this space, which is beyond just ASIC. That will be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Hema. Now for the Q&A, I'm mindful of time for Blockchain Australia's purposes. The first question, which I might put to Cathie, because I think it's one that should be able to answer comfortably in this space, is has ASIC considered offering a regulatory sandbox license for innovative firms engaging with technology and products that don't fit neatly within the regime?
So ASIC actually offered a regulatory sandbox some time ago for various fintech proposals, and there is currently an extended regulatory sandbox which the government has built on the ASIC regulatory sandbox and set out a process and have created a framework for a sandbox for products, and so that's not a bad way to go, because if you're worried that your proposal looks like it would fit in the regime and you otherwise meet the requirements of the sandbox, there you are. You have that opportunity to use that. One thing that I think is really important that people do need to understand is that we are quite a unique regulator compared to many of the others globally, and that is we do have some modification powers. So when something's new and novel and it's not clear if it fits the regime, but it otherwise meets all the key objectives of our regime, we can consider applications to make modifications to the rules. Now, we obviously aren't interested in doing something like that if it would be in a way that wasn't consistent with the objectives and goals that Parliament set out. But nevertheless, we do have that power, and that's something that is very rare globally for similar organisations. And so we are willing to consider well-developed novel applications where they are, but that does require a degree of stamina and working in partnership together to do that. Hopefully that helps answer that question.
Thank you, Cathie. I am mindful of time, so if we don't get through all the questions, please feel free to email through to me, and I'm happy to try and facilitate those where possible. I might pick the one in the middle just because it's there for a minute. Hema mentioned that crypto assets have various different features which make it difficult to draw a line for a regulatory perimeter. However, other jurisdictions have managed to draw such a line, is meant. Why are we unable to do this also? From John Basilius. Noting that we do need you to articulate what those are for the business, but Hema, did you want to respond to that?
Look, I think I can give a very short answer, and that's largely because different jurisdictions have different frameworks when it comes to financial instruments and financial products. And in Australia, our definition of financial products is very broad. And as such, really you need to look at individual characteristics, features, rights that are offered in smart contracts that underlie crypto assets to figure out exactly what it is that they're doing, and is it a derivative, security, managed investment scheme, so forth, all of which, and a financial market, all of which have a very broad principle-based definition.
Jonathan, could I just supplement that? So, it's probably quite easy for you to develop a product that fits within our regime. And can I just say the Australian regulatory regime is a regime that is held in great stead internationally, and it really is worth thinking about how it's an asset to the business you're building to come within the regime. And so sometimes it might be worth thinking about, what tweaks do I need to this great idea to be sure it comes within the regime, because sometimes that makes life so much easier. You can operate in the framework rather than trying to operate in a situation where you may feel there's some uncertainty. So I just would encourage people to think about that.
All right, I think we're out of time, but thank you all for the questions. And again, please feel free to reach out if you did have questions we couldn't get to. But again, thank you. And I believe you'll go to the next session now.